Good morning and welcome to our follow-up webinar on immunising the childcare sector against COVID-19. My name is Adam Thomas and I'm pleased you can join us. I'm going to follow up with some questions from some answers from our previous webinar. Before I do get started, I'd just like to show you how to ask questions during today's webinar, and we would like to do so, and at the end we'll try and answer as many as we can. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. So firstly, can I ask everyone to raise their hands using the button highlighted in red? Okay, perfect. And then to ask a question, you just need to type it into the questions pane on the control panel. You can see highlighted in red. You can send these in at any time during the webinar and we'll address them personally following this live session. Now, the questions from last webinar. During last webinar, many of you had questions, and we'd just like to focus on a couple of those first. The question was, with the childcare subsidy allowing childcare to be free, is the maximum revenue an operator can obtain during this period capped at 50%? Good question. Yes, it is capped at 50%, as long as the rate cap, which is $11.98 per hour, is not exceeded. So you can get up to a maximum of 50% for your average occupancy of the last fortnight of February. So we'll go on to additional topic points in relation to exceptional circumstances, payments, etc. Later on in the piece. But first and foremost, up to 50% of your average occupancy for the last fortnight in February. We talk about the exceptional circumstances application, and that will square away in the later piece. Second question, is there likely to be more or less childcare centres up for sale as a result of the current situation? In our opinion, the vast majority of businesses, irrespective of whether they're childcare, have been affected by this pandemic. We are starting to see a return to a certain level of normalcy now. So we anticipate in the short term there'll be similar levels as there were pre this pandemic, and less available in the medium term. And the reason for that, developers and tenants at the moment, I mean, developers have sort of slowed up a little bit, and also tenants at the same time they're more so focusing on getting their current operations in check. And sort of not looking too far ahead of the future. Some are agreeing to new leases, but at the moment they want to effectively tidy up and ensure that the operations that they have at the moment are running as smoothly as possible, and or exercising a certain level of caution at the same time. So to recap, more in the similar level in the short term, and probably less in the medium to long term. Third question, how important is a bank guarantee or security? Well, that's crucial. I mean, they're not just for childcare, but for every single commercial lease that you have. The lease is only as good as the tenant's ability to service those, that legal commitment. So absolutely, bank guarantees are vital, personal guarantees, director guarantees, the longer the better. That's absolutely crucial. We touch on the code of conduct. That's a pretty important point. And that was ratified and put into legislation a couple of weeks ago. And that's a national code, and that's mandatory. So if the services suffer a 30% decline in revenue, they can apply and be granted that code. But we go back to bank guarantees, and that's where it ties in, because if the tenant if the code applies to that business, bank guarantees and security within that lease can't be used for shortfall of rental payment under that code. So it's quite vital that you obtain your appropriate and thorough legal advice at the same time. And I think it's the last question here, but how do operators prove or verify trading data or drop-in placements to landlords to help negotiate? So the question was, what are we asking for? What information? So we've got utilisation reports, and they're either sort of with Kindy Now, Quick Kids, or other various childcare early education software. And that's information that's readily accessible and available at the click of a button by every operator, because that is information that ordinarily is passed on to the federal government for payments with the childcare subsidy. So those are simple requests. Also, profit and loss statements to prove that there's a 30% decline in revenue, and most businesses, pretty much every business, will be able to do that given the recent tax ruling in relation to the JobKeeper payments and the ECE package not being part of the taxable supply. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. What assistance is the government providing? We're moving into a summary of previous points in our initial webinar. So we've obviously got the ECE relief package, and as I touched on before, it's a weekly payment for the average occupancy of the last fortnight of February. So that's pretty crucial. In addition to that, you've got the JobKeeper payment. So Dan Tehan, the Federal Education Minister, talked about occupancy, talked about costs, I should say. Childcare costs being about 60% of revenue. So the JobKeeper payment is quite crucial, because pretty much all services will be able to apply and receive the JobKeeper payment. Good Start, there was a ruling on the 6th of April, I should say, in relation to Good Start, and they have received special exemption or dispensation. So they are now able to receive the JobKeeper payment as well, which is great. The Commercial Code of Conduct, which is across all sectors. The first two, the first one I should say is the ECE relief package, but the Commercial Code of Conduct is quite important, and that is a mandatory code of conduct, and it talks about, and it ensures that tenants receive 50%. Tenants are asked to pay 50% of their rents up front. The balance of that 50% is payable. The balance of that 50%, 25% of that is deferred and amortised throughout the life of the lease for a period of not less than 2 years. And the remaining balance of that 50%, i.e. 25%, is waived. So there are a couple of conditions that needs to be met in order for you to provide, as a landlord, for you to provide that concession and for the code to apply. First and foremost, they need to be a participant of the JobKeeper payment program. So first and foremost, that needs to happen. Secondly, their revenue needs to be less than $50 million. So this is for small to medium enterprises where the revenue is less than $50 million. And thirdly, and most crucially, they need to prove a 30% decline in revenue. And we touched on that previously in relation to utilisations and also profit and loss statements. So they've got to have those 3 points: 30% decline in revenue, turnover less than $50 million, or third point at the same time is that they've got to be a participant of the JobKeeper payment and program. So the most recent government updates, and quite crucially, the ATO ruling, which was something that came across the forms of media last week, and it talks about the taxable supply of the ECE package not forming part of your taxable supply. So that's really important in terms of the decline in revenue. So it's not going to be included in the JobKeeper revenue test calculation. So really quite crucial, that ATO ruling, because there were concerns that that payment of JobKeeper would mean that the revenue didn't decrease by 30%, but with that ATO ruling, it ensures that it doesn't form part of your income and revenue. So what we've also seen is the exceptional circumstances payment as well, which is another important point, and it's an addition to the ECE package. And that exceptional circumstances payment is really quite important, and it talks about payments where attendance is at the same levels or greater than the last reference period, the last
fortnight of February. So you can apply for an exceptional circumstances payment at the same time. Also, the second way that you can receive this payment is if the JobKeeper payment doesn't apply, such as local schools, independent schools, councils or church groups, etc. And also for new services. And this is quite crucial. We've got a lot of developer clients, landlords, should I say, of new centres or developer clients where tenants were looking to occupy the premises this first quarter, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they've been unable to occupy. So there's exceptional circumstances payment in relation to that. So there's really three additions to that ECE relief package, which talks about these exceptional circumstances payment. In addition to that, we've got state-based funding. So state-based funding, they aren't receiving the free childcare package. So additional states and territories have made payments to independent schools, to sessional care, to and government-based kindergarten programs, 3 and 4 year old programs, and that's quite important as well. So, for instance, South Australia is providing a $10,000 grant for community-based ECE services. Victoria's committing to free sessional kindergarten with a $45 million funding boost. And New South Wales, a couple of weeks ago, announced a $395 million package to protect council-based jobs at the same time. So there's certainly federal and state-based initiatives here. From a landlord perspective, we talk about additional concessions or concessions that states are applying, and that is a land tax concession. For instance, the Western Australia government and the Victorian government are giving you up to 25% concession for your land tax bill if the code applies for your financial year 19-20. So we've got multiple concessions and incentives to help kickstart the economy and get through this period. So we've fleshed out a little bit more in relation to this point about landlords and what can they do to protect their assets. Again, work collaboratively with your tenants. If the code applies, then there's not a lot you can do. I mean, you have to work with your tenant. If the code doesn't apply, if they're not a small to medium enterprise and they turn over $50 million or more, then it's up to you to work with them. The onus is on the tenants, to work with you, but there's no legislation that ensures that you need to provide rental relief. So that's pretty crucial. At the same time, you still need to work with them because a lot of services have seen a pretty drastic and significant decline in revenue and occupancy. So working with your tenant is quite important. Again, speaking to your bank and financier, we're talking about a market commentary around a 6-month freeze on loan repayments. So that's quite crucial. And if you manage the property yourself or you use a managing agent, we recommend, of course, a managing agent. They can give you a broad analysis and broad spectrum of all negotiations with a vast array of different size tenants at the same time, from mum and dad operators all the way up to the larger listed tenants. Again, it's case by case. CBD assets of CBD businesses have probably suffered a sharper and more severe decline in occupancy, given most people are working from home, and that's in stark contrast to the suburban centres. So we talk about the long-term viability of the sector and where to from here. Absolutely. I mean, childcare, the government has provided, both state and federal, more so the federal government, provided significant funding to this sector, and it's one of the only sectors to receive significant funding. And that is quite crucial because without childcare, essential service workers can't go to work. So it's important and so crucial that childcare centres remain open. That's the first point. The long-term viability of the sector, there's a carryover from the previous point in relation to working collaboratively with your tenants. There's a recent announcement by Charter Hall, their childcare or social infrastructure REIT, and they of the 1st of May had entered into an agreement with Good Starts to on revised terms across 40 centres for 20-year leases with fixed reviews and increases. So that is quite crucial. You can negotiate more favourable terms, additional lease tenure, if you like. So it's got to be a two-way street. If the tenant's receiving or if the ECE package doesn't apply to the tenant, then they've got to be able to offer you something, and that could be in the form of increased tenure at the same time. In addition, we've got the ECE relief package, and that is going to last until the 28th of June at least, so the end of this financial year. There's again talk and commentary around an increase in the childcare subsidy and how that will work moving forward. So again, these things are up for debate at the same time. I think the last point, we sort of continue to talk about how vital this industry and sector is to the Australian economy. Essential workers, vulnerable children, they need access to childcare, early education and childcare. It's as simple as that. And without that, the economy can't continue to thrive and to operate. So short, sharp, and brief today. Again, thank you for tuning into today's session. I can see that we've got a lot of questions. I think there's 6 or 7 already on the screen. And I'll follow these up this afternoon with you personally on the email. If time allows, we'll do another webinar over the coming week. And always, if you need to speak to one of our specialist agents, myself, Natalie, or Zoma, give us a call. Contact numbers below, and we'll go from there. Again, thank you for listening, and see you soon. Bye for now.